Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and we want to welcome you to our career panel. My name is Lamia Rashid. I'm a junior at Rutgers. I'm double majoring in psychology and public health, and I will be the moderator tonight, inshallah. I wanted to give thanks first to Al Falah for this amazing community opportunity. Alhamdulillah, it's all thanks to them. This is our first virtual career panel, and it's for all the young adults that are just starting out into their field or they started and they just need some advice. So inshallah, this will benefit you. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to all leave just a little bit more knowledgeable than when we came in. So for just some housekeeping, keep yourself on mute while the panel is speaking. Sometimes background noise can throw a speaker off, and we want to benefit as much as possible. So just keep yourself on mute while the panel is speaking. If you can turn your cameras on, that would be lovely. Unfortunately, this had to be on Zoom because of the pandemic. If we could have had it in person with snacks and everything, but Zoom will have to make do for now. So if you could turn your cameras on, it will feel more like a conversation. So if you can, please turn it on. There will be a Q&A session, inshallah, at the end. But if there is a specific question you have about something a speaker just said, feel free to drop it in the chat, inshallah, and we'll address it. So enough about, oh, and also it will be live on YouTube and it will be later kept up on YouTube for you to play back, inshallah. And it's being recorded. So enough about myself, enough about the housekeeping. You guys are all here for our esteemed panel, mashallah, some of the best and the brightest from our community. So if you guys want to take turns introducing yourselves, Brother Nadim, you can go first, and then Sister Amina, and then Brother Bakar, inshallah.
Inshallah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Rasulullah wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. My name is Nadim Ahmed. I work at Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm the EVP and president of the hematology organization. So I look after our commercial operations in over 60 countries. So thrilled to be here, and hopefully we'll be able to offer some meaningful advice to our youth as they think about transitioning from college to a new career, or even some advice if you're early in your career. So looking forward to the discussion. So Jazakallah khair, Sister Lamia.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm Amina Mohammedi. I'm thrilled to be here. Honestly, for me, just you all joining us is one step closer. If you come away with one or two things, I'll be thrilled about that. But I can't wait for the discussion.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. This is Abu Bakar. So honored to be here on this panel and looking forward to a very great discussion, and hopefully we'll learn something from everyone here. I live in Basking Ridge, 3 kids here. I've been living here for 6 years now, and looking forward to contributing anything I can do to share. I work at CityMD and Summit Medical Group as a Chief Information and Digital Officer, so I run the Alta Technology and Digital Operations for the company. Looking forward to the discussion.
Jazakallah khair for attending our panel and being a part of it. Now we will dive into your career journey. So if each of you could just speak about the beginning of your career, decisions that you've made that kind of led you to this point, any advice you have woven in through that. We can go in the same order. Brother Nadim, you can go first, and then Sister Amina, and then Brother Abu Bakr.
Sure, no problem. So what I'll do as I go through my career journey, I'll also point out some decisions I made along the way, which hopefully will be some learning opportunities for everybody, myself included. So I am a pharmacologist by training. So I did a science undergrad degree, and then I did a master's degree in IT. So that's learning point number one. If you can get a postgraduate degree, please do so, because that will allow you to enter your career at a higher point, inshallah. So that's one thing that I think is an important learning point. And then I didn't really know what I wanted to do after I had done both my bachelor's degree and my master's degree. And so I didn't really have a fixed career plan. So that's probably a learning in hindsight for me too. So if you can, it's good to be thinking about those sorts of things. I started out in GlaxoSmithKline, which is one of the larger pharmaceutical companies, in the research and development organization. And I started out in clinical development. And I realized in that function, which I enjoyed very much, I enjoyed the science, but back then in clinical development, in order to progress, you really had to have an MD. I wasn't a physician, so I knew that there was going to be this glass ceiling for me at some point in my career. So then what I did was I changed direction. So that's another learning point. Think about the function you're in and think about the growth opportunity for you. And is this where you want to be, or is it somewhere else within your organization or even outside your organization? I then moved to medical affairs, where I became more exposed to the business side of the organization, and I really enjoyed that. And ultimately, I moved into marketing. So the other learning point I would say there is, as you start in your career, we get very tempted by the next job title, and I want to be this level or this form of director. But having a broad experience is really, really important. So to get an experience across different functions within an organization can be really, really helpful, because it makes you a stronger candidate, both internally and externally. So those learning opportunities are really important. So I would say get as much of a breadth of experience as you can. The other thing that you'll find as well, if you work in a specific function, but you start to interact with other areas of the business, people start to get to know you. They start to get to know your performance capability, your potential capability. So that can open doors for you as well. So really think about rounding out your career as broadly as possible. So that was one of my learnings as I kind of progressed my career. And then as a family, we made a big decision when I was offered the opportunity to move to the US from the UK. You probably worked out from my accent, this isn't a South Philly accent. And so that was a big decision point for us as a family. Our kids were young at the time. And so we decided to make the move. And interestingly, it was an assignment, or it was supposed to be an assignment. So we arrived in Philly in 2001. So much for an assignment, right? It ended up, we stayed, as many people do. So I think that would be the other learning, that if you do get offered the opportunity, either domestically to move or internationally to move, or even take on a project that's outside of your area of interest, don't be afraid to jump into those things. They can be tremendous learning opportunities, and they really can be career accelerators too. And so I think that's another important aspect. So once we arrived here, I then had the opportunity. Now I was firmly in the business because I'd gone into marketing. And so I had the opportunity to work on a range of both global and US strategic and operational commercial roles. So I learned a lot about the business moving forward as I did that. So after about 10 years in the US with GlaxoSmithKline, I received a call one day from a recruiter working on behalf of Celgene Corporation. So with GlaxoSmithKline, we were, as I mentioned, in the Philly, Pennsylvania area. This was a job in New Jersey. I wasn't looking to move at all from my company. Things were going really well at GlaxoSmithKline. Another learning opportunity. The best leverage you have, or the best time often to move, is when you're not looking to move. Because if you think about it, there's no reason for you to move if you're doing well in your organization, right? So if you are changing career, or somebody's tempting you to change career, they've got to make sure they bring something decent to the table that's going to prize you away from your current company, right? So that's another learning opportunity. You have the most leverage when somebody is coming to seek your talents and lure you away from your company. And I said no to them. With everything they said, I said no. And I said, I don't want to move to New Jersey. I don't want to take on this role. Every single objection I had, they found a solution for it. And in the end, they put me through to my ultimate manager at Celgene Corporation. And what he said to me was, Nadeem, why don't you just come up to Summit, New Jersey for one day? That's it, just one day. If you don't like it, it'll be one day out of your life, but at least you won't regret it. I mean, that was a very compelling pitch. So he was an English guy too, so the accent, of course, helped as well. And so then I took the trip up to Summit, New Jersey. I met the team at Celgene, and really enjoyed the people I came across, really had an exposure to the culture. And so then I went and joined Celgene Corporation, and I went back into global marketing. I was in US marketing at GSK, then I went into global marketing, and really enjoyed it. And about 18 months after I joined Celgene Corporation, there was one of these special projects that came up, and my manager came to me one day. I remember it was a Friday distinctly, and he said, look, there is this project, we want you to do it. And I said, well, tell me about it. And he told me about the project, and I said, no, I'm not doing that project. It's not my area of expertise. It's not why I joined the company. It's not the function I'm interested in. So really, Dave, I don't want to do it. So he said, all right, don't worry, I'll tell the senior leaders and then you'll be fine. Monday, sheepishly, he walks into my office and said, I told them, but they're not really taking no for an answer. So then I had a decision to make. And the reason I'm mentioning this is another key learning point. I actually ended up doing the project. It wasn't my area of expertise, but what it did do was it gave me exposure to the senior leaders of our organization. So sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes we don't know what's best for us, especially when we're young in our career. And whether it's our parents or our management, sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith. And I did for this project. And it tremendously accelerated my career because I was in our senior leader meetings on a weekly basis to give an update, including our CEO. And it really helped to propel my career in Celgene. So then I went back into the US business at Celgene. And then ultimately, fast forward about 10 years, Bristol Myers Squibb came along and they acquired our company. And that was another time where I had to make a decision of, did I want to continue with the newly acquired, integrated, big combination company of Celgene Corporation, Bristol Myers Squibb, or did I want to do something else? And of course, the company had to decide whether they wanted to choose me or not. The good thing about Celgene was, given that project that I worked on, I was able to accelerate my career. Ultimately, I became a member of the Celgene Corporation executive team reporting to the CEO. And I was the first Muslim on our executive committee. Alhamdulillah, that was fantastic and a great opportunity. And then as I transitioned to BMS, which is my current role today, it's been a year since the integration. I've learned a lot about joining companies together, especially the size and scale of this acquisition. Alhamdulillah, I'm on the BMS leadership team, again, the first Muslim on the BMS leadership team. But I think as I went through that experience, there were so many learnings along the way, and especially the last one I told you about, that we don't always know what's good for us. I plan, you plan, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners, and I've lived that. I honestly can tell you I lived that. And we started out in the East End of London, and look where we are now. So subhanAllah, the blessings are there, but at the same time, you do have to take control and make your decisions along the way, and really think about how can you progress your career and take those moments to really make a difference, because it's okay not to have a fixed plan at the beginning. And I would say for those of you who are thinking about leaving from college and taking a job, your first job may not be your ideal or perfect job. As long as it's a company that you're interested in some ways, your first job matters least. Because what will happen is it'll be your entry point after you do your postgraduate degree, remember, it'll be your entry point in. And then if you're successful, inshallah, people will see what you bring to the table and they'll take a bet on you. Just as people took a bet on me along the way. I changed roles and went to different functions. I didn't have the traditional experience in each of those functions, but because people got to see what I could do, I was able to progress my career and work on different areas and different projects. And so, also at the same time, try and get a broad range of experiences, learn the business so that you really understand all the functions within a company, so that when that next role or promotion comes, you can distinguish yourself from others. And so anyway, that's my journey. I hope you got some benefit from it, but they were at least some of the learnings that I took from it, which hopefully will benefit all of you, inshallah. So jazakallah khair for listening.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So I'm just going to break up our discussion into three parts. One, I'm going to start talking about supply chain and what it is, because that's where I've spent my career. And then I'm going to talk about the path that I took, and then I'm going to add in some what I would call life lessons along the way. So as you all know, supply chain has many roads. You can take the logistics path, manufacturing, to procurement, to name a few. So if you're entering into this career path, think about what interests you. For me, it was manufacturing and procurement. I knew I loved watching our designs go from concept to hard prototype. I loved working with our manufacturers around the world to solve technical issues. And I love the art of negotiation. So that's sort of the path that I took. Our supply management team was responsible for procuring all the product for Tiffany's around the world. It was $1 billion in spend with about 150 manufacturers that we oversaw. Some of the skills needed for my area of the business included capacity planning, supply planning, negotiating contracts, costing, working cross-functionally. You really had to like that. So I did want to share that with you. So now about my journey. I, unlike Nadim, spent 30 years at Tiffany and Company. So I was what they called a lifer. And but I held 9 different roles over those 30 years. So I made sure I continued to progress. I started out as the liaison between our corporate division and our manufacturers to design and produce all the tabletop product for the company for hotels and restaurants. And then I ended up parlaying that into a role where I could buy all the tabletop product for Tiffany and Company. Then I moved into the fashion jewelry area and the fine and engagement area. So at the end, as Nadim said, because I had gone to each of the different areas of the business and I knew everything about each of those areas, I ended up running the division at the end that was responsible for the entire thing. Each of those roles gave me a wider domain of control, and with that, a larger group of staff. And I really do believe that it's critical to not only be good at the technical side of your job, but also as part of your career growth, know how to be a good leader, to lead with trust and respect and integrity. Because from my perspective, it's really easy to manage, but it's not so easy to be a leader. You really want to be that person that gets everybody motivated and integrated in whatever you're doing. So just as a stopping point, if you don't really know the difference between being a good manager and a good leader, I really would encourage you to do some research on that. There's some great books out there. Stephen Covey is one of the guys that I love most in that area, but take a look and look at that as a side note. So now I'm going to share with you a few things I've learned along the way in no particular order. I have to say I've got hundreds and hundreds of life lessons. My kids can attest to that, but I've picked out 6 things that I think that may be important to you guys as you start your career or in your middle of it. So number 1, you're the quarterback of your own career path. So what do I mean by that? I'll just give you a quick example. I was a manager back in the mid-90s. And I came across an ad, and back in the day, you saw advertisements for jobs in the newspaper. So that's how much I'm dating myself. So I'd seen an ad. I was a manager, and I saw an ad for a director position in my department. Nobody had told me about it. So what I ended up doing is I ended up putting my resume together, putting a cover letter to that resume. I submitted it to my boss, who hadn't even considered me for the position. I forced myself into an interview to interview with him. And I had to remind him, I think people get really comfortable when you're in a job that maybe they don't consider you for the next position, but I had to remind him why I was the best candidate for that role. And I ended up getting it. So you have to be your own quarterback. Number 2, it's important to start a role with everything you've got. Reputations are really easy to build and really hard to get rid of. So if you go into a new role and you're really organized and giving it effort, putting in the extra time, doing some side research, you're going to easily get that reputation of being that go-to person. So I really think it's important to persevere there. Number 3, take advantage of people being on vacation, on leave, or on a business trip. And you're like, what? What do you mean take advantage of that? So again, it's being in the right time at the right place. A little bit about what Nadim said. When someone's on vacation or they're having a leave of absence or a business trip and an opportunity comes up to be on a project or do a little bit of extra work for your boss or a cross-functional colleague, lean in and do it. Because again, you want that recognition, but you want the exposure. That's so much more important than anything else. Number 4 for me, speaking with purpose and succinctly is critical. 2 people could be saying the exact same thing at the same time. One person's spinning and they're going around and it's taking them 10 minutes to make their point. The other person in a matter of words says exactly what they mean. Guess who's being listened to? And I have to tell you, I used to work with a team of people. We were all directors and he's not listening. So I'm going to mention his name. His name was Hal Pinsler. And this guy used to spend 10 minutes trying to tell a story. And then I would try to summarize for him because poor guy, nobody was listening to him. And when I would summarize in a matter of seconds, people would be like, oh, great idea. But he had the great idea, but he just didn't know how to say it. So make sure that you know exactly how to speak and that you come from a position of authority when you're saying something. Don't make it up. But if you do know something, lean in and without doubt, you're going to get far with that. And in this case, that phrase, less is more, I think really goes a long way. All right, number 5 for me. I have 2 more. Number 5, for me, it's no joke that you need that 60-second elevator speech ready and memorized. because God willing, if we ever get back in elevators again, and you're in the elevator and you see a senior member of your organization, please think of me and introduce yourself, number one. And number two, be ready to say something about the job that you do, what your title is, and something interesting that you're working on. I'm telling you, they're going to get off that elevator and they're going to remember you. And you need to make those moments happen for you. And number six, for me, become an expert in something. I know it sounds really esoteric, but it's really true. For me, I self-taught myself about our packaging and sustainability within Tiffany and Company. And I ended up running that division as one of my side gigs because I had taken an interest in it. I had found new ways to do sustainable materials and sustainable packaging. And people saw that I had that interest and the enthusiasm and the passion. And so you end up taking on these additional roles that ultimately get you from a liaison to an assistant to a manager, a director, a VP. And there's no better compliment that if somebody in the company calls up and says, I have a question about such and such, who should I go to? And they automatically think of you, you know you're doing your job right. So in essence, for me, whatever you do, lean in as much as you can, even if it feels uncomfortable, to Brother Nadim's point, even if it feels like your shoes are on backwards, take that step, listen, learn, and ask as many questions as possible. And I guess, you know, it's not a Hallmark card, but I really do believe this, that anything is truly possible. If you believe in yourself and you put in the time and the effort, you really can, sky's the limit, especially here in this country. That's it for me right now. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you. I mean, it's tough acts to follow here. Both of them very, very inspiring stories. So it's good to go in the last because now you can pick up all the good points from everyone. But I'll try to make it very personal to my own story to say where my career journey started. And I'll try to weave in a little bit of my personal story as well as the advices as I go along. I have a story which is probably very typical to an immigrant story, you can tell. I came to the US 30 years ago, and when I got here, obviously from a very humble background, so I didn't have any money with me. I had $100 that I came in with. I knew on day one that it would only last me a week. So on day three, I was working in a warehouse in an electronics store. And I think from that day three that I arrived 30 years ago and now, I don't think I've stopped working. And I think that gives me a lot of pleasure. That is everything that I've done, I've built it on my own, by my own self. And alhamdulillah has worked out with a lot of prayers from my friends and everybody else. So I'm happy to where I am today. Just a couple of things. Early on when I started, obviously I never attended a day school in my life. I've always attended schools in the nights, whether it's undergrad or master's. I did my undergrad, then did my master's, then did my diplomas and other stuff. But throughout 8 years that I've been in school, it took me longer because I was always being in an evening school, or I could take an 8 a.m. class if I can make it because I had to be at the job at 9:30. So throughout this, but the point here is to make is like, no matter what your background, what your history, what your context is, always make the best out of what you have been given. Always try to, and don't try to make excuses that I don't have this, so I can't do this. I don't have this, so I can't do this. Be very, very firm, know what you want to do, or play a little bit of a different side, what some of the very esteemed speakers have said, but my experience has been a little different, so I'm just gonna explain my way on how I was able to get through this. So try to make the best of what you have and try to make sure that you don't think of yourself that you are any less than anybody else that is out there, and try to make the best out of it. My first professional job that I started working, I'll tell you a quick story. This is a very real story that hits me all the time, and it says that drives a lot of my decisions in the career. It's my first professional job after I worked in warehouses and stores and everywhere else to make sure that I can pay for my college. Went to the cheapest county college that I can find, which is the Essex County College. So I get there, started at Essex County College. When I couldn't do any more Essex County College, I went to the first Jersey City College, which is probably the cheapest one there. So I could just keep going there. But then alhamdulillah, it worked out okay. But my first professional job, when I was working, I'm sitting in front of my manager 4 months into my job, and I'm in IT, so I was a developer, I was a programmer at that time, and at that point I was like, I knew what I wanted to do. 4 months into my job, I'm sitting in front of my manager, he's asked me what a typical question every manager asks. He says, so what do you want to do? So what do you want to do in your career? And I said, I want to continue to do what I'm doing for the next 3 years, doing the programming. Then I want to manage the team for the next 2 to 3 years. Then I want to run a department at the director level, which goes across for the next 3 years. And then after that, I want to be in the position where I can report into the CIO. And at age 40, I want to be a CIO of an organization where I can run the entire department across all the organization. And he just looked at me and he said, wow, you have it all figured it out. I'm like, you asked me what you want me to do. I'm telling you, this is what I have in mind. This is what I want to do. And the point here is, and you can adjust and change along the way, but know what you want. But very important, I tell people, not just know what you want and set your target when. It's very important. People leave it very open-ended a lot of times. Says, I want to be this. But if you don't have a goal in mind to say, I want to be this by this time, it becomes very open-ended and you're eventually gonna get it. But if you have a time frame, and alhamdulillah, believe it or not, at age 40, I took the role that I wanted to take, which was a CIO role, to enter into a C-suite. It happened with a lot of, obviously, work and prayers and everything else, but it's just that I had in my head for 15 years, I want to be there at this time, and I keep working on it. And I think Brother Nadeem said it, and Sister Amina said it also. You have to think yourself. You know where you don't want to be. If you want to be a journalist, which means you want to have a broader experience, because you're working towards that, so you take intentional steps to make sure that you broaden your horizon and you don't go deep on working. Some people aspire to be deep and specialists. Some people aspire to be a journalist, and some people like to have a broader experience. I always knew what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go into too deep in one area, because I want to be broader, because I want to be the one who's going to be running the entire departments in the organization. So it's important that you should know what you want to do, but also when do you want that to be done, and set your goals and evaluate and change those things. A couple of other things in my own journey. I think Brother Nadeem had a bigger impact with it, but I had to do the similar things. When I got my first C-level opportunity, I had to make a decision from a family side to move, not from East London to Philly, but from New Jersey to Connecticut, which was still a big deal, because you're just taking people and you're just taking your family and you're taking your kids out of school and you're doing all of it. These are not easy decisions. These are very tough decisions to make, and you make those decisions considering where you headed, what's the impact to it. And I knew this was a decision I made that will help not just me, but my family. And then we know we're gonna come back and we're gonna be settling where we want it to be. So sometimes you have to make these tough decisions, and you have to know what you have to give up to get something. And it doesn't have to be every decision and every opportunity you have to grab. You have to make your own decision to understand which is the right one for you. It's important. A couple of just more tactical things. Always, and I don't know if anybody can tell you that they're perfect. Always learn from your mistakes. When I started my career, I hit rock bottom. I'll give you an example. Rock bottom means when I just graduated, and I didn't tell you that, but when I graduated in finance, and then I moved into IT. Another point, you pivot as you think it's the right career goal for you. I was working as a temp, where 24 people were hired as a temp. That was my first job outside as in a call center, doing the tax reporting answers. I think this was the wrong, and you should be okay to express yourself, what you learned and where you hit the rock bottom, where you bounce back. There were 24 people that were hired as a temp. At the end of the 4-month assignment, 23 of them were hired and one of them was not. And that was me. And that was like, okay, that was the moment for me. It's like, what went wrong? Everything from there on, it was all up and up from there. Because I realized that I may have done something. What did I do wrong, which I didn't get it? Maybe it was not meant for me. After that, I started working on this thing. I had a focus. I knew exactly where I was going. I knew where I want to go. And then from there on, it just, makes sense. It worked out okay. And then for the next 15 years, I moved on and got into the roles that I wanted to be. But one last thing, in the office politics is you cannot get away from it. Get used to it. You have to play that. You don't have to lose your integrity. You don't have to do this, but you still have to play the game. That is the name. That is nobody. If anybody tells you that you can just go there and there's no politics, that doesn't work. I always say when you have to work with your department, your boss is important for you because it makes a decision. But let me tell you, your boss's boss is more important than anybody else. If you have to be considered for promotion, the promotion is recommended by your boss, but approved by your boss's boss. If you're not visible there, that decision or that approval of that decision makes it very much difficult. So always keep an eye on one level up from where you are. The next level is your natural progression. The level above is the ones who's going to make a decision for you. So always keep that in mind, because my manager will not make a decision without his manager's approval. So it's always that second layer that gives you that advantage to say, yes, I know this person. I know Abu and he's done a great job. Yes, I approve that next step for him or her. So always keep that in mind also. I'll stop here. I know there's a lot of, we can keep going on these things, but thank you so much for listening.
Thank you to each one of you for sharing your unique journeys. MashaAllah, you each have taken such a unique path to get to where you are. But Sister Amina, I want to focus specifically on you. You gave us 6 key pieces of advice that I wrote down for the future, but I wanted to ask, what specific advice would you give in terms of how to build an actionable career plan?
Okay, so I might sound like a broken record, but for me, you have to be an active participant in moving your own career forward. So I used to think that as long as I worked really hard and I put in the hours and I did what people asked of me, I was automatically going to get promotions. Like I was going to put my hand down and promotions would come to me because I earned it. Sometimes it works like that, but most of the time it didn't. So I made sure that I had a career plan. I like to talk in steps, so I'm going to talk about 4 things. First of all, to what Abu Bakar said, set concrete goals with dates. So when you start your career plan, you want to make sure that you include timelines, where you want to be 1, 3, 5 years. I wasn't one of those people that had like a 10 or 20 year plan like Abu Bakar did. I started much smaller. And so I made sure that I set up short-term goals, and then I threw in a few stretch goals. Why not? You got nothing to lose. You're just putting it on paper. It's for yourself. So make sure you put that together. Then I would say start skill building. Get all those tools in your tool belt. So once you know what skills you want for the experiences you want, you have to start by improving yourself. So I would start by researching job descriptions. If you want a specific job, you'll need to know exactly what that job entails and what those HR departments are going to look for in candidates. So there's so many easy ways to do that right now. So you can figure out what certifications are available in your field. If the job you want requires specific technology skills, look for one-day seminars, look for online training courses. There's so much that's free right now. And whatever you do, if your company is willing to offer you continuing education and throwing at you $5,000 or $10,000 to do continuing education, make sure you take that money, spend it, whatever it is you want to do. Number 3, quickly, create a career file. I went old school and I put a file together. My kids would say, put one in your computer, whatever you want to do. But you need to do career planning and put real projects together, not just stuff that's brewing in your head. So if you're a visual person, make a career board, whatever works for you. Make sure you include brochures and educational seminars, professional magazines you want to be a part of. I do hundreds of to-do lists. I do it even now that I'm retired. And anything else that pertains to your career goals, put it in that file. Make sure you look at it as much as you can. And the last one on that front is setting up informational interviews. I also did a lot of skip level meetings with people. So if I was a vice president, I went to a senior executive, you can do it at every level. But find people who hold the jobs that you want and ask them if they're willing to talk to you. Trust me, people love to talk about themselves. Make sure you sit down with them. You can learn so much and get so much advice from people. And I know we're going to talk about it later, but you need to find mentors. I don't care who they are, find somebody. And when you go to those informational interviews, bring your resume, but don't throw it at the person. They're going to think you're trying to backdoor a job offer or a job interview, but just have it ready. So those are my quick ones on career planning.
Thank you for that. And now for Brother Abu Bakar. So you talked about not thinking less of yourself as a person, you know, giving in a little bit to office politics, but what advice would you give in terms of building your own brand so that you stand out from others?
Yeah, no, I think this is very important. If you, I break it down into these three layers to this thing. Building your brand may be a little bit of a bigger umbrella question, but to how do you stand out from others? How do you make sure that you'll be the choice if there are three people? How do you stand out from them? I think the basic is you should be good at what you do. You have to, this is the table stake. You need to be good at what you're doing. Whatever your goal, whatever your job is, you have to be good. But the reality is the world is overly competitive right now. Good is not good enough. We know that good is not good enough, and people need to be above and beyond to be considered for the promotions or raises or the next jobs. So how do you differentiate yourself? Two things to me. One is given is like you have to be good at what you do. Second, the thing that differentiates you is your social and communication and your soft skills, your relationship building, your things that you do. It's not what you say, is how you say it. It actually matters a lot, especially in the corporate environments. It does matter a lot. How do you present yourself? How do you communicate? How do you act? So go extra mile to build your soft skills, which will separate you from this thing. For my line, which is more in the more technology side of things or on the digital side of things, it's even more important because technology people tend to be a little bit more inwards. And you need, in order for you to stand out, you need to be not just good at what you do, but also be able to communicate. And what Sister Amina said, to be able to communicate your message succinctly, clearly, very hard to do in a technical side of things because they're all very in details and weeds of it. That's number one. Number two, learn your business. Learn the business. I don't care which company you work for, which industry you work for, which organization. You have to step away from what you do and learn the broader business. You should be able to talk business. You should be able to interact with the business people. You should be able to learn and be able to understand what you're saying, and then you can go ahead and translate that to your own work. But learn the business. It will stand you out, and learn your soft skills and know what your core job is. A table stake. You have to be good at it.
Okay. So Sister Amina touched a little bit about having a mentor, but Brother Nadim, can you speak specifically about what role mentorship can play in advancing our careers? And there's actually a question in the chat box that I think can tie into it, and it's, do you think parents should encourage their kids to target specific industries? Should parents kind of take on that mentorship role?
Okay, so I will definitely weave that in, Sister Lamia. I was thinking the same thing as you, so that's really good. So I'll start broadly on mentorship, and then I'll address that specific question. So look, I mentor many people across the globe. I really, really enjoy it. And alhamdulillah, I've been fortunate that I've had many great mentors and managers along the way that have really helped me to think about my career moves. And I go back to a point that Brother Bakar made. So one of my managers in the past, really terrific manager, she gave me the advice. She said to me, Nadim, when you think about your career, don't think about the next position, but think about the position after that. And what that helped to do, it helped me to stop spinning my wheels for that next job title. And it really became my North Star of where directionally do I want to take my career? And that one over also allows you to connect to the managers at that level, to the point that Brother Bakar made, right? So the mentorship piece, I'm just giving you an example of what I learned from being mentored. So I do that a lot. At BMS, I'm the executive sponsor of our CLIMB employee resource group, which is our young workforce, essentially, you know, Generation X, Y, Millennial, Z. And so I get to engage with that workforce very often because I sponsor that resource group. And that gives me, mashallah, that gives me a lot of energy. They do wear you out sometimes, but mashallah, it gives me a lot of energy. So a mentorship is really, really important. And I think Sister Amina pointed out really well. A mentor, I would say it's critical to get a mentor. And a mentor can be either within your company or outside your company as well. And there's different ways to make that work. If you choose a mentor inside your company, ideally, it's better to have a mentor that's outside your immediate function because it allows you to get a second set of eyes. It allows you to build a network beyond your immediate function. And mentors can really help advocate for you, and they can help you to build and establish your own network. And what I mean by advocate for you is, so when a group of leaders, and every company does talent management, and when they talk about the talent, and I've been in some of these meetings myself, where they'll mention a person and nobody's heard of that person, not because that person doesn't do great work, they just haven't had the exposure outside. Whereas if you have a mentor in that room as well as your manager, that's at least two people that are going to be advocating for you. If you have your manager's manager, as Brother Bakar said, that's three people that are going to be advocating for you. So it's really critical to get a mentor. And I would ask and encourage all of you, even if you're in college or you're in your career, you know, try and seek out a mentor that can help you. I don't want to speak for all of us on the panel, but we're all LinkedIn, hit us up. It's something that, you know, we enjoy giving back to the community as well, and happy to do it as well. But mentorship is really important, and it can really progress your career. Thanks. Oh, the last question, I'm sorry. So let me pick that one up. So the question was about parents encouraging. So one, it depends what you mean by encourage and whether that's a euphemism. So I'll just say one thing. Mashallah, we have a lot of Muslim doctors. I'm not sure we need 1,000 more Muslim doctors, right? I don't want to upset any parents, right? but I would say, look, here's where wisdom comes in, right? Our elders in society are wise, and we're blessed by having our elders live with us in our community, right? Unfortunately, slowly, you know, as age comes, our elders are disappearing from our communities, right? And that's a sad loss for all of us. So I do think the wisdom from your parents, your grandparents is important. So I think there is wisdom we can always benefit from. Number two, you've got to think about what are your capabilities, what are you interested in, and then do your parents have the experience to help guide your career, right? Because our parents really want what's best for us. And so if we're like me, myself, I was a first generation born and raised in the UK. So my parents didn't really have that professional career knowledge, but what they did know was getting an education was really important for their children. So that's what they really focused on. Alhamdulillah, now that I mentor people and with my own kids, I'm able to provide at least some advice from my vantage point of having had experience in a professional environment. So I think our parents are always trying to encourage us to do the best for us. And then a mentor can help you as well. But to the question, yes, parents can guide us to what we want to do, but it needs to be a two-way conversation that's aligned with both your interests, the capabilities. Is it something where you can really make a career at? Look, we're in a COVID situation where unfortunately lots and lots of people are losing their jobs as well, right? And so I think there's also that opportunity, like, is there a job in front of you that you can take on today that broadly matches the area you want to go in? You have the skills and capabilities to do it. It will be a decent career, you know, that will give you professional background, the benefits that come with it. If it's not the one that you dreamed about all your life, it's okay. If it's a decent company, you can go in and make an impact, like Sister Amina said, and then move around. So mentorship is important. Do take the advice from your parents and the elders in our community, but also use your own knowledge and experience and think about what are the areas where your parents have the experience and can guide you, and where are some other areas where you can go to mentors, etc. as well. So that's how I would address that question, Lamia.
That was very sound advice, especially for us college students. So Sister Amina, you talked about an elevator pitch, knowing one off the top of your head, kind of networking yourself. So how can we use networking to further our careers?
Okay, so I'm happy to talk about this topic. I guess I just want to say for me, networking is like going to the dentist. You know you have to do it. It feels a little bit uncomfortable at first, but once you've gone, you're really happy you did. So that's really what it's been like for me. It's definitely a critical component to your career growth. So it really has two parts. First is building your network, right? So a business network should really consist of more than just your professional people you know. Like, so it's great to start off, if you're in college, you start off, you have your friends and your friends' friends, but it really should include people who might one day be in a position to help you land that next job. So this might be somebody who's going to serve by giving you a reference, sending you a heads up about a job that they've heard about that's not posted yet, or providing an introduction to other people that can help you. So don't underestimate the power of that. And then there's the second piece to that. For me, it's about managing your network. So in addition to building it, you got to keep it going. And once you've added people to your professional circle, you have to stay in contact with them through email or phone calls, and through LinkedIn is an amazing tool to use. But don't just do it when you want a job. Stay in contact with them throughout, see what's going on, how they are, because you never know where those conversations are going to parlay you. So yes, and yes, you have to network. Some people are great at it. Some, it feels uncomfortable, but it really is a great key to success.
Okay, thank you for that. So people often talk about EQ versus IQ. Can you explain the difference and why that is important, Brother Abu Bakr? And I know that especially you spoke earlier about hitting rock bottom in your career, and that must have been a difficult time for you. So I'm sure you can give a lot of wisdom to this answer.
Sure. I mean, EQ and IQ, obviously, it's such a wide topic and it's been talked about. I'm sure everybody gets it, but I'll try to give you my simple English version of what IQ and EQ is. Basically, IQ is it's your intelligence, right? It's your skills. It's your ability to do things what you're supposed to do. That's, again, what I call it a table stake. That's what you need to do. I think it has evolved and changed in the last 15, 20 years. 20 years ago, probably nobody was talking about EQ. Everybody was talking about IQ. There were tests, there were quizzes, there were measures, there were benchmarks for IQs, and everybody was just saying, if your IQ is not good, you're not good enough, and you cannot be a leader. I think things have been started to change, and I think that's rightfully, you can see. So what I say is your cognitive intelligence, right? How do you see that in an IQ? EQ takes it to a different level, which is what we're talking about, which is your ability to communicate, ability to interact, ability to influence people, which is very important, how you influence others to get them to do what you want them to do. That's the difference between what a leader and a manager do. Manager can tell you what to do, and leader can make you want to do this thing. And that's the difference. And as you go higher in the organization, it's much more difficult for you to manage. It becomes imperative for you to lead. Otherwise, you're going to have too many adversaries throughout the organization if you just keep telling people what to do versus make sure they understand why they have to do it and they want to do it. All right. So EQ is all about awareness, empathy, social communication, that part of it. That's your soft skill. That takes you a long way. I do want to add, I don't know if people heard it, but I'm sure some of you are already aware of this. There's an IQ and there's...
Brother Abu Bakr, you muted yourself.
Sorry. I don't know where I left it, but it says now people are talking about not just IQ and EQ, they're talking about AQ too. AQ is your basically adverse quotient, right? So I'll summarize it in this way. At every level where you are in the process in your career, every one of them is important. IQ is very important when you're beginning your career because that's like, you gotta know what you're doing and you have to have this cognitive intelligence to say, I know what I'm doing, what's the part. As you grow and get into your mid-level, emotional EQ becomes much more critical for you because that makes you grow. And adverse becomes even more critical when you actually get to the senior and most senior level. It's like, how do you stay there? How do you protect yourself? Because it's all about how you can take the punches and be able to continue to go. And it's hard when you are at this highest level. That adversity, that AQ piece becomes very, very critical for you to say, how do you take all these, because there's going to be so many people, they're all different point of views, but they're going to be hitting you, and then how you can continue to navigate and protect your integrity. So all of these things is very important at different stages of your career. Some things are more important than the other. IQ takes you into the business, knows what you're doing. EQ makes you grow, and AQ helps you stay at the power. That's how you see the difference between the three.
Okay. To expand on that, Brother Nadeem, what are some key attributes senior leaders look for when making hiring or promotion decisions?
Okay. I'll try and keep my answer brief because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions from the audience. So maybe I'll put hiring in the category, what do I look for when I interview new hires that are coming to apply a job for me? So number one, did the candidate provide me with very specific examples and answers to the questions that I asked them? Because it's not good enough to give a philosophical view of if I asked a question about leadership, right? So if I ask somebody about leadership, I want them to demonstrate examples of how they demonstrated their leadership, what did they do, and what were the results. So the more specific you can be in those interviews, you will stand out from the crowd, going back to that brand marketing and the point Brother Bakar made. Do you have broad or narrow experience, right? Are you a specialist or a generalist? If I'm looking for a generalist, then I don't want somebody necessarily who's had 20 years in a very niche field, right? Whereas if I'm looking for a specialist, that might be exactly what I'm looking for, right? So that's what I would be also looking for. Funny as it may seem, how was the energy of the candidate? And that's a really important point. When you turn up for interview, be your best self. Give yourself the biggest shot, because as Brother Bakar said earlier, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, it's how you deliver it, that elevator pitch that Sister Amina said. So turn up and show them why there is nobody else in the world that should take this job except you. So really come to it with energy and gusto. Learn about the company that you're turning up to interview for. Read their press releases, read their earnings report. Like Brother Bakar says, learn about the business so that people can really see you've turned up and you're very well researched, and then turn that into why you want to join this company, why this is the only company for you. What's so special about that company? Because once you can make that point, you can show them why you're the person for this role as well. And by the way, I would say, if you don't have examples or that you can bring from your working life, because maybe you haven't held a job before, right? Or maybe you've had a part-time job. Think of those life experiences that you can use as experience to address those questions. So if it's a question of leadership and you were on a sports team, bring it through, make it count, take that opportunity. It doesn't always have to be the perfect answer, but if you have examples that can address that question, even if it's not work experience, make sure you do that. So that's how I think about the attributes I look for in hiring. And then promotion, I'll just make 3 or 4 quick points. You know, let's assume you have a really good network, and let's assume you've done all the things that Sister Amina and Brother Bakar said, so that in that room and the promotions are being discussed, you've got at least 3 people advocating for you, right? So let's assume you've done that before you even get walked through the door. Have you shown examples of going above and beyond your day job? Like Sister Amina said, when somebody went on leave or a leave of absence, did you step in and pick up that extra project that wasn't your project in your traditional day-to-day role? Are you a team player, or are you just out for yourself? People that collaborate and work across functions really are held in high regard, and they differentiate them. I tell you, when I look at promotions, if I see somebody who is in it only for themselves, delivering great results, and next to them there's a person who's delivering the same great results, but is really known to collaborate across the organization and make those around them better, that's really important. So being somebody who's seen to be collaborative, it is really important. Did you take on any cross-functional or enterprise projects yourself? as Sister Amina said, the person that has the most control and say in your career plan is you. No, people aren't going to just run to you, right? And so did you step up and show initiative when those projects are out there? Again, how did you approach it? What did you do? What were the results? And then the final thing I'd say is take the opportunity to operate at a higher level than your role. So in other words, your boss's role. Think about some of the things that your boss is doing to be successful. Play up above your role so that when that opportunity presents itself and everyone looks around and says, now that so-and-so's moved on, who's the person? As Sister Amina said, everybody automatically says it's you because you've stepped in and you've elevated your game to play at that higher role. So they would be some of the attributes, both from a hiring and from a promotion perspective, Lamia, I would be looking at.
Thank you to all of you for answering these questions. We will now begin our live Q&A session. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. You can also unmute yourself and ask questions at this time. I was sent a couple of questions that I can go through, but at this time, if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, feel free. Don't be shy. Go ahead.
I have a question. I know I'm basically the youngest one in this whole meeting. I'm a freshman at the Bridgewater High School. I have a lot of goals in terms of, being athletically, like wanting to be an Olympic swimmer, wanting to be, like one of the best programmers, wanting to be a doctor, having all these wants and desires. But I know sometimes here and there I'll have issues with execution, and I know that comes across as like for a person who can execute what they're saying is a big part in life. So do you have any tips on basically, getting things done and being, super productive?
I think Sister Amina should take that one. She's really good at it, mashallah.
Okay, fair enough. First of all, I really wanted to commend you for joining today. I think that's the first step in you, setting yourself on the right path. If I had had this opportunity when I was a freshman, mashallah, who knows what would have happened. But I'll just tell you what I do to stay organized. I make a lot of lists, and I do it now on my phone. I used to do it on notepads, but I make a lot of lists. And that's because I'm a kind of person that if I can cross it off, I feel good about it. I know that I've gotten it done. It's within my control. I put lots of reminders on my phone. And if you really want to get type A about it, I color code sometimes, in Outlook. When I was in the workforce, I would color code what I was doing. So in school, I think it's the same for you all. If you can take any of those approaches, for me, it's keep it simple. Whatever you think you can do on a consistent basis, that's what's going to be good for you to stay organized.
Thank you. And I just have, on top of that, so my mom's an ER doctor, and my dad basically in the pharmaceutical drug industry. And basically, I tend to have a lot more pressure because I'm the oldest out of three, and having like certain high standards, and I don't know how to, like, I want to come across like, hey, I can take on certain roles, but I don't know really like between like in family situations, like how to do that.
Sure. Maybe since you mentioned the pharmaceutical industry, maybe I'll jump in there. So look, first, thanks for your bravery in asking the first question. I didn't have the level of confidence you do at your age, mashallah. So that's really great to see. So I think you're inspiring all of us, by the way. I think when it comes to those sorts of things, look, I'll tell you, one part of my personal story that I didn't tell you was, I was the first in my family with my brother going to university, right? And so again, it was that typical immigrant story, right? And my parents, they didn't really say, this is the direction you should go. But what they did say was, get a good education and go to university. And the rest was really up to me. And so I was interested in science at school, and I ended up doing pharmacology because that was an area that I was really interested in. I think you still have time, to make your mind up about what you want to do. I think all the goals you mentioned, from swimming to vocational to being the role model in the family as the older child, I would say, look, mashallah, enjoy your childhood too. It's really important, right? We should never forget you are a child, right? And it's important to make sure we all have rich and fulfilling childhoods too. But you have time to make those decisions, my young brother. And if there's any way we can help you along the way, of course, we'd be happy to do that. But I would say, you know, as Sister Amina said, all those little goals you have, build those little goals, continue to have the discussion with your parents, speak to maybe some mentors that can help guide you. But at the end of the day, your parents really want what's best for you, but you also want to make sure that you think about, you know, where your talents and capabilities and interests are. And then inshallah, you can have a fruitful discussion together. But all of us are here available for you, inshallah, to both you and your parents.
Thank you so much.
Can I just say that I have to commend Rahim, right? Rahim, is this your name?
Yes.
You are ahead of all three panelists here. Nobody, I probably I'm speaking a little bit too much. Nobody at your age was thinking what I want to do, and I have these options to do, and to be brave enough to come in and ask those questions, and then a follow-up question after that. That takes a lot of guts and courage. So I'm very, very confident you're going to do great, and you're going to make good decisions along the way. Just stay focused and just keep going. Enjoy your childhood. You have a lot of time to do, but you're on the right track. You're going to do better.
Thank you.
Rahim, I am sure you are an excellent role model for your brother Aiden, so don't you worry about that.
Oh, he's right now watching TV right now in the TV room.
Tell him Sister Lamia to do his homework.
Okay.
So there was a question in the chat from Farouk. Do you want to unmute yourself, or would you like me to ask the question on your behalf?
Come on, Farouk.
Sure. I can ask it real quick. I was curious. So how does someone go about, like a new grad, go about developing a professional network if they are if they're still entering like their new position? Like, do you guys have any tips on how someone can successfully start going about that, I guess, that journey?
Sure. I can take a crack at that, Farouk. So I think there's lots of informal ways these days now, and especially through tools like LinkedIn, etc. I mean, I get so many connection requests. I always just say yes, because I think if I can help the younger generation, I try to do that. But I think there's a couple of things. One, I think LinkedIn is a really good way of developing those networks. And then I would ask among your friends and relatives. There's always people out there. We have such a small world of community around us. And then the third thing I'd say is, once you start showing results in that job, people will want to know you, and you can quickly develop your network that way as well. But keep in touch with the community here and the professional network here, Farouk, because there are people here that I mean, you're just hearing from three of us. There are much better and more talented people in our community than us. So stay connected with the community, and through them, you hear that story about 6 degrees of separation. There's always a way to build that network and reach out. And then once you, inshallah, enter into that career as well, of course, show everyone your stuff and what you can do. So that would be my advice, but I'd love to hear other people's perspectives.
Oh, I think I 100% agree, and I'm just going to add one more thing for you. If you know what's your field is, there are very specific every field has their own social and networking opportunities. There are organizations that are specific to that. The benefit and the reason why we just want to go into those and sign up or follow or be able to do that, those people are all there for a single purpose, because they're looking for this. Either they're looking to network, they're looking to help, or they're looking to help others. So go look for your specific industry or whatever your line is. I'm not sure if you're engineering, medical, or pharma, or whatever that is. There are specific groups in that verticals, in that industries, that will help you do that too.
Appreciate those insights. And thank you for the discussion. I think I definitely really benefited from it. So appreciate it again. Jazakallah khair.
If there is anyone else that wants to unmute themselves and ask a question or drop it in the chat, feel free now, or I can ask a question that someone sent to me. Okay, I will ask a question that someone has sent to me. So do you have some tips for building a strong resume? I know that several of you have spoken about showing up with a resume, making it solid, but how do you go about making it something that someone wants to read and look over? And Sister Amina, I think you spoke about it, so.
I can talk about it real quick. And again, this is just my personal having looked at millions of resumes just in all the job interviews that I did. But a couple things that I think people forget to do is they don't list their accomplishments, they list their skills. It's really important that you list your accomplishments and make sure you start with the most important, newest accomplishments first. So if you did something really great in your job, make sure that's the first thing that you put in there, because people quickly, they scan it, they do the first couple of reads, and then they're gonna pass on it. Make sure it's clean and simple. Don't do something this is again me personally, don't do something funky. Now's not the time for you to do something funky where you give it on purple paper or something. Just make it very individual and about yourself. And also make sure, for me, because in supply chain, it was very data driven. So if you've got accomplishments that you raised earnings by 12% and you cut costs by 10%, make sure you put those things in there. And then I just have one other quick thing. I don't know if you guys have all heard about JobScan, but there's an application out there called JobScan. And basically what you can do is if you're going for a job, you can put your resume up against the job description, and then it's going to come out, it's going to do the algorithms, and it's going to say how many keywords that you have that match. Unfortunately, a lot of HR departments right now, they don't even read them. They put them through one of these JobScan algorithms and you get spit out. So if there's any bit of advice I can tell you, invest in JobScan. I think you can also use it free in the beginning, and then you're going to have a match. If you're in the 60, 70, 80% match, you've done it right. And if you're not, get those keywords in there so that you do match.
Okay. Would any of the panelists like to add on to that, or good?
I think it's great advice. I got nothing to add.
Okay. So I received this question that's specific to the pandemic right now. Do you have any advice on working from home in the current COVID environment? If any of the panelists want to take a shot at this one, I know it's been a difficult time working from home.
I'll try to see if I can understand the question. It's probably very broad to say, is the experience working from home and what will be the future look like for the work from home? I think is that.
I think it's more so how to stay productive while working at home. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that work from home for certain industries, obviously it's new for most of the industries. So for some industries, it's been this, but now it's accelerated or expanded significantly. I think there's enough talk about, and I do this because that's part of my role in my job to figure out how to keep the organization going in this COVID, is that there's a serious debate about working from home and the fatigue that it is creating in the job, in the workforce. And nobody would have expected. People always thought working from home will make it easy for people, and it will be easier, and people will be enjoying it, and people will think it's great. And it is, in a lot of ways it is. But I think it also has escalated the expectations of the organization or the teams, or people now expect that if I had an hour and a half commute each way before, it just got lost into said that you have this hour and a half now. So it just became a norm. I think we just got too into it. It says, if you were working 8:30 to 5 before, because you were commuting from 7 to 8:30, now people are starting at 8 o'clock. And instead of you were leaving at 5, you're now extending it to 5:30 and 6. And that is creating the fatigue. And then just the beyond the video and on the computer for like 9 hours or 8 hours, or sometimes that's straight, because people have lost the concept of lunch. Everybody takes break. It's just getting lost there to say you're home, so you're just available. There is productivity overall has increased. I'm not sure about the long-term implications of doing this, the social implication, the interaction that if I have my team members who have never seen in 3 years, that work started, and the long-term implications is yet to be measured at this point.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things. So I agree with all the principles Brother Bakar outlined, and nobody really knows about the long-term implications. So maybe I'll provide some practical tips for the kind of the here and now and the short-term aspects of where we are. So I've been working from home myself since March. There's no way I ever thought that would be happening. I've always been an office-based person, commuting to the office, etc. So recently I read an article which described it, and it said it's not working from home, it's living at work, which I thought was a really good way of describing it. So you need to make sure it's not living at work. And what do I mean by that? When it first happened, I can tell you at our company, for the first at least month, it was nuts for me. It was like those telecons, as Brother Walker described, like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the evening. So I think work-life balance is really, really important. If talking about the lunch period, I'm not always successful on Monday to Friday, 5 days, but at least 2 or 3 days a week. I block out the time to make sure I take the time out for lunch. Secondly, I put blocks in my calendar so that when somebody's trying to have meetings, they can't have meetings because my calendar is showing a block, so that there's that mental space time taken off as well, right? And then I think you have to find ways to disconnect from the laptop and the phone. So find a place that is your workplace at home. Don't drift around doing work everywhere. Carve out a designated space so that you can walk away from it come 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and then not go back to it. So, because otherwise the burnout issue is a really acute one, right? Because if you think about it, in the workplace, those small hallway conversations saved about 30 emails. Now we're getting 30 emails instead, right? And so we're getting jammed with this stuff. And then the last point I would make, really have a conversation with your manager about prioritization and what's really important and what has to be done now versus what is something that's a lower priority project that allows you to focus on the things that are really going to move. So there are at least some tips that I've personally experienced or worked with my team on to try and establish a work-life balance, and to get the most important work done. And then the last point I'll add, the collaboration piece that you heard from the other panelists. Find creative ways to collaborate and try and establish that network in a virtual way that's going to continue to support you and find ways to reach out. But it's really important to try and make sure you maintain that work-life balance so that it is working from home and not living at work.
Very good points. Burnout is a very real concept. Before we continue on to the last two questions, do each of the panelists mind dropping their emails in the chat for any questions that people may think of later on and want to reach out? So just drop your emails in the chat, please. And then as college students, we're always told about the importance of internships, but how important are internships really? And any one of the panelists can take this one.
I mean, I can take it, I guess. I'm going to state the obvious and to say, yes, they're important. But why are they important? I think there's two sides to it. One is you don't always know what you want to be in this world. It's not always so black and white. So internships give you a great opportunity to try something out over the summer or in the middle of your work year for a couple months. You're not that committed, but you get to see what industry is like, whatever it is. And then you can start carving your path again to your career path of what you want to get into. That's the one side. And the second side is, if you can build your resume and have an internship every year, specifically, I guess, while you're in university and even in starting in high school, imagine what your resume looks like when you get out of college and university. You've had 3 or 4 jobs already. So I love the idea. I wish I had done it so much more when I was in university.
Excellent. And the last question, I want each of the panelists to answer this, but what would you have done differently earlier in your career? And do you have any last pieces of advice or just, advice for all of us? So Brother Nadim, you can go first, and then Sister Amina, and then Brother Bakar.
Yeah, I think so. I think I would probably say that during my career journey, maybe there were a couple of stops along the way where I stayed too long with some of those roles. I wish I had a little bit more of that laser-like focus plan that Brother Abu Bakr had. And so I think probably, there were probably a couple of roles where maybe for about a year or so, maybe I drifted a little. I'm a pretty focused, action-oriented person, but sometimes in your career, when you're not 100% sure about exactly what you want to do and you want to just learn in that role. But as I reflect on it, there were probably at least one or two roles where I think I could have probably made a move quicker. So that would be my hindsight reflection. And then in terms of advice, look, we're all learners, right? And so we're all learning from each other. So I would say, again, think of your jobs or roles as learning opportunities. And the more you learn, the more experience you'll get. And so again, I always encourage what I call horizontal learning as opposed to just vertical learning, right? And so again, unless you're a specific content expert, and there is a role for those folks, as Brother Abu Bakr said, but if you want to take on that broader general management type role, try and rotate in different functions to get as much learning experience as you can, so that when you're up against the next person, you make a compelling case because you stand out because you've done so many different roles and gained some leadership skills along the way.
Just really quickly for me, I think if I had learned earlier on in my career how important it was to get to know people at different levels across the organization, I think I probably would have accelerated even faster than I did. I did become my own advocate. I feel like, I don't want to speak for all women, I just think sometimes we feel like we have to have every single skill that next role has in order to ask for it or go for it. And earlier in my career, I would have taken those risks and gone for jobs, even if I didn't have all the skills. And to Jalal Mohammedi's question, I'll answer that if you don't mind. And then I'm sure he would want somebody
conflict of interest, I'm not sure.
Somebody a lot more intellectual than me, but I'm going to take a stab at it. How do you ensure continuous growth in your position without switching companies? So for me, it's about leaning in. And so when there's those projects out there that aren't being assigned to you, but you see, or you see a need in the organization that nobody's talking about, bring it up and get to it, extend yourself. And for me, I don't think I can answer the red flag of staying in a company too long, because I stayed 30 years, but in a position too long, for me, it was simple. If it's not fun anymore and you're not learning, move it, get on with it. But somebody else should answer that so he doesn't.
Yeah, I think for me, there's two flavors to this, Jalal. One is, if you're within a company and you're being there a while, I think you need to use that as leverage to push the company a little bit, right? So I think if you're somebody who wants to continue to grow vertically because there's a very specific area that you're interested in growing, I think you should push the company to accelerate that growth. Or two, if you're somebody who has gained exposure to other parts of the business, the advantage of being in a company is that network can help you move across, and your leadership can help you move across, which you may not be able to do if you went to another company for that specific different role, because they'd want the experience. So I would say in this situation, push your company a little bit, whether you want it to be that vertical growth within a given function or move outside of function to another role. If the answer is no to either of those, you're starting to get close to your red flag, I'd say. Thanks.
Do you want me to answer, Lamia?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah.
So the question on, I think your earlier question, you wanted each one of what would you would have done differently or something earlier. I personally think, and I still think I have a lot to learn on this one, is the professional coach or mentoring. I think we should have more open to it, and we should have done this thing more. And I still feel like I have a lot to learn when it comes to how do you deliver your message the most impactful, succinctly, in a way that the other person gets it quick. And that's a very, 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 very important skill for leaders to have. And that's what makes you different from the others, is like, if you can come in and just make a I think Sister Amina said it very eloquently, is be able to explain that succinctly, quickly, that everybody understands. If you can do that, you stand out 100% from the crowd. And if people can focus, and that's where your EQ comes into a little bit. That's where I think I would have engaged the professional help early on in my career.
Thank you for that. If there are no more questions, then inshallah we'll close out tonight's session. Oh,
Somebody asked the question.
I think one of the barriers that people in the workplace have is that they feel that they can't have an open relationship with their manager. What advice would you give in terms of how to build a good relationship with your manager so you feel comfortable discussing things such as if, for example, a project may be too hard or not in your scope?
To feel they can. I think it's I don't think so that's fair that you should have. Generally, managers, if your managers are, if you don't have that relationship that you can go to the manager and tell them about what you, whether your issues or you're struggling with something or you need help with, then you don't have a good relationship with your manager. I think that's plain and simple. I think you should not be worried about being vulnerable at times. It's actually not a bad thing. People think it's a bad thing to say when you can go and tell your leaders to say, I don't think so, I get this, can you help? People are generally more open to give you help than to say, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help. Just take on those, on that step forward and have that open relationship.
Kaleem, I would just add a couple of things. One is, I don't know if you've heard of Myers-Briggs, but they have a lot of those EQ tests. And sometimes you got to figure out what style your manager is. Like, I had a boss that was like, didn't want to hear any of the background story, just wanted you to talk straight up. And then I had bosses that were really open and friendly, wanted to hear about the family. So you first have to establish, how does your manager want to receive information? But more importantly, how do they accept information and can embrace it? So the sooner you find out that style, it sounds like you may be experiencing that, I think the easier it is. And honestly, you can tell I'm like a really straight up kind of person. If somebody came to me and said, listen, I really want to have this open dialogue with you, I hope you're open to it, I'd be like, wow, power to you. You are super mature. And the fact that you've prepared me by saying that, I'd be open to it, but that's me.
So we got one more question in the chat. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself? No? Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Just a quick question. What are your tips and tricks for navigating workplace politics?
Brother Bakar, I think you spoke about office politics. So we want to take this one?
If you can master that, you're on the top of your game. No, what are the tips and tricks? I think you should draw your lines to where there has to be, at the end of the day, you need to be true to yourself, and you need to have your integrity to what you want to do and what you can't do. There are things that when I say you should have a very open relationships with your managers or your peers, you should be vulnerable to it. You should look for not to your direct boss only, but to your boss's boss. There's a method to that madness to it. And that's because the decision makers are those people. And you don't have to go around the back of somebody to be able to do that. You should have an open relationship to do these things. These things do help when you have to navigate through these politics of the organization. And at the end of the day, if there is where you feel that you have to, if you don't feel good about certain action that you're doing, this is generally, the rule is not a good thing for you to do. I mean, you need to be true to yourself. You need to be integrity is always going to be there, but you need to navigate slowly towards outside of your direct influence to make sure you have your partners or your supporters behind If you're not there in those conversations, you have to have your support organization with you.
Yeah, I would add, Sarah, and I think it's a great question. I would say never compromise your principles, your integrity, or your values. If that's what's being asked to be sacrificed, well, then that's the red flag that we spoke about before. Don't allow it to diminish you. So that's number one. And as Muslims, this is really important to us, right? It's what our deen teaches us. Secondly, though, in most companies, there is this set of influencers, like this informal network that helps to get things done. Find ways to plug into the influencers in your company so that when it's your turn to kind of help to unclog the system or get things done, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's just part of activating your own network. And that can be efficient because sometimes it's not 100% clear in the absence of written down process, like who's influencing and unclogging the machine. So for me, that's part of really cultivating, developing your network. But as Brother Bakar said, you have to draw a line in the sand, which are your principles, your values, your integrity. Never compromise on that.
So we actually received a question from someone watching the YouTube stream, and it kind of ties into a question that you answered above. But what to do if your manager does not want to promote you because he feels that you are too important for him? In terms of the work, I'm assuming that you're too valuable to that team to be moved.
Sure. So I can give you a personal example. There isn't one time in my career that I've ever blocked anyone on my team taking an opportunity outside of my team because I felt they were too important in my team. Because you know what happens when you do that? Then that employee has a choice to make and they can leave the company. So I would rather the high-performing, high-talent people stay in my company, even if it's not in my immediate team or department, versus then leaving the actual company. So I think this does come back to what Brother Abu Bakr said about having an honest conversation with your manager and establishing that relationship and explaining why this is an opportunity for you. Again, if you have that sponsorship, that advocacy through your mentors and your network, the organization will soon see you have promised to deliver to the broader organization. Nobody wants to hold down a high performer, high potential person. So I think first, get to the relationship level to be able to have that discussion with your manager. If it's still not progressing, then you need to start talking to other people to allow you to grow your career. But I've never blocked anyone, ever, and I will never do it.
Can I just say a side note to that? Because I know Brother Nadeem is an amazing leader. And that's, to me, again, that goes back to the difference between a great leader and a good manager. A great leader feels such pride when their folks get promoted. And you just want to see their careers grow. I'm still in touch with so many of the folks that I work with. And, you know, that's a feather on your cap when you see all your folks getting promoted. That says something.
So I believe that was the last question. I'll just give anyone a second if they want to drop something in the chat. But I just want to remind everyone that this is being live streamed to YouTube, and inshallah the recording will be posted up for you to view later, to rewatch the advice and the tips and tricks that we've received today, alhamdulillah. So I don't think that anyone has any more questions. So with that, we'll close off. I just wanted to thank the panel for their time tonight and their advice. I know each one of us has benefited. Even in the chat alone, you can see how much they appreciate your insight and all the questions that you've answered tonight. I know that we are all leaving this panel feeling just a little bit more confident about the future, inshallah. So I wanted to thank you for being on this panel tonight. And I want to thank Al-Falah for this opportunity. If you guys have any last words.
I would just say, Sister Lamia, great moderation, Jazakallah khair, for taking this on and doing it. And again, we're happy to support anybody who's on here today. You've got our email addresses, and if you want any additional advice, happy to give it. But Sister Lamia, terrific job, well done, mashallah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and I think with that, inshallah, we will finish. So Jazakallah khair for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Rahim.
Take care.